Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Heidi Horsley, and I'm here today with my friend and guest co-host, Alan Pedersen. Hi, Alan.
How are you doing?
Good. We're going to do a show today that is near and dear to your heart.
It is.
And you're kind of going to be the co-host and the guest.
That's big responsibility, but I'll do my best.
It is. We are going to talk today about the healing power of laughter.
Right.
With two very funny people. You, who I think you are very funny, and Jordon Ferber, who is right next to you.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about some of the things you two are doing together as well. Before we get into that, I want to introduce you, and then I want to start out showing a clip that Jordon did, which is about 2.5 minutes long, of him doing a comedian, what do I want to call it? A comedy shtick.
Yes, part of my act.
Yes, and you'll see how funny he is when you see this clip. So let me start out talking about you for a minute, Alan.
Sure.
You're an award-winning singer, songwriter, television writer, and host. Your daughter Ashley died in an automobile accident when she was only 18 years old.
Right.
You have presented programs for grieving families in over 1,600 cities. That's 1,600 cities.
On the road again.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
See, he's a singer-songwriter, you can tell. And this is part of your Angels Across the USA tour.
Right.
So if anybody wants Alan to come visit him, please go to Angels Across the USA and he will come. And you are also the former executive director for the Compassionate Friends.
Correct.
Sitting next to you is another funny man, Jordon Ferber, who I have seen do his stand-up in New York City, and he is hysterical,
He's
trust
a pro. He's a professional
He is.
stand-up New York comedian.
Absolutely.
That's a lot.
It is. It's very competitive in New York to be a comedian, and he does it well. So he is a comedian, a podcaster, and a public speaker. His brother Russell died in a car accident at just 21 years old. Jordon is very involved with the Compassionate Friends, both locally and nationally. He runs the New York City sibling meetings, and he has a very popular podcast called Where's the Grief? He and his family run the Russell Ferber Foundation, which provides scholarships to the Culinary Institute of America. They have something going on June 28th. They bring in amazing comedians, including Jordon, and they have phenomenal food. Doors open at 6:30, so please visit. Where can people find that?
You can find tickets at russellferberfoundation.org.
Very good. So go there. I will be there. So please say hello if you do show up. I'm going to start off with this clip.
This is what I've always wanted to do. I told my mother when I was 9. 9 years old, I told my mother I was going to do stand-up. I told her not to worry. I know comedians don't make a lot of money, but I plan on living off of you guys for a while. So. Yes, which I did. That came true. Yeah, I basically lived with my parents until it was no longer socially acceptable. And even then I only left because that's when it starts getting a lot harder to lie to women to get them to come over. Just so you know, my roommates are a little older. One of them might tuck me in later. Don't even worry about it, really, it's fast. She's in and out. But the thing is, really, my parents are pretty cool. They didn't make it easy for me to want to leave. My parents are pretty cool. My dad might be the coolest 71-year-old you will ever meet in your life. As long as you don't hang out with him for too long. But he is cool. If you don't think my dad is cool, try to think about any other lawyer you have ever met in your life that you would enjoy spending social time with. Yeah. My dad is cool. My dad, he wears a bow tie, he drives a Vespa, he owns a vaporizer. Pretty cool. He'll show his age eventually, though. We were walking around the village once. He was like, "Oh, Jordon, they sell dungarees over here. Don't you need to get a new pair of dungarees?" I'm like, what the? Am I getting too big for these britches? Is that what happened? I was going to purchase some pantaloons on the way home, if that was possible. But they're very supportive. My dad actually, funny enough, my dad bought me a t-shirt a number of years ago that said, "Bank of Dad, a lending institution for as long as I can remember." And I used to wear it, and it was really cute, till I saw a homeless man wearing the same t-shirt. I'm like, oh. Guess that's why sometimes my dad's a little stingy with the loans. Covering more than just me. I told him the story, and he was like, "Oh, come on, you're not homeless." I was like, "Okay. Well, thanks for dinner." Appreciate the dinner.
That is.
We've seen him in action a few times.
Did I enjoy
love-
watching that?
I love that. I cannot get enough of that, honestly. I love that clip.
2 minutes just flew by.
It did.
It just didn't.
My parents are easy scapegoats. They're easy to make fun of, and they're good sports about it. So they're obviously staples of my act.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the two of you and what you're involved with.
Well, we're going to do a comedy show in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, we're doing a show just prior to this year's TCF conference on July 6th this year. And July 6th is significant. It's also that is the day that Russell died.
Oh, wow.
And so it will be the 21-year anniversary of Russell's death on the day that we do it. It'll be the first time that I'm doing comedy.
He died at
on that
21.
day.
It'll be the 21 first year anniversary.
Yep.
And that's when you're doing it.
And here's
That's
what's really
amazing.
wild. I started out in stand-up comedy, and I certainly didn't take it as far as this consummate professional has, but the first stage that I was on was in Denver, Colorado. And so we're going to do a return to Denver, Colorado. Jordon came up with a great name for the night. It's a night of stand-up comedy called
Laugh Till You Cry.
Laugh
I
Till You
love it.
Cry. And so I'm going to be the opening comic and kind of the MC. We got a special guest going to come and do a middle set, and then our headliner is going to be Jordon. And we're just going to have us and a few hundred of our closest friends. And
It's going to be interesting. You know, I get to being able to do a comedy set where I get to do all the jokes about grief.
Yeah.
Followed by a conference where I get to talk about the grief and slip some jokes in while
that's
I'm at it.
exactly
Why,
exactly.
you know, it's been interesting over the years, and Jordon, you know this really well. Sometimes at the grief conference, I'm overwhelmed with sadness. And I will go up to you and go, Jordon, tell me a joke. You know I do this to you. Tell me a joke real quick.
Right.
So that I can get some other energy in there and
Right.
feelings in there. And I'm just wondering, what do you all think that laughter does? Why is laughter important when we're grieving?
Laughter is one of those things, especially when it's contagious. When you're around other people, there's that sense of, being able to relate to what other people are going through. There's that recognition of shared experience. Sometimes you don't even have to really have a great joke. Just pointing out something that's happening that you're both experiencing is a great way to remind each other, like, hey, look, let's laugh about it. Mm-hmm. There's absurdity around us all the time, and it's nice to be able to point it out when we're also surrounded by sadness and chaos a lot of the time as well.
And don't you also think? I think when you're new in grief, and I know for everybody it's different. And those of you that might be new in grief out there tonight, you think you're never going to laugh again, and but we have to laugh again, because if you think about stand-up comedy or comedy in general, it's really observational. It's like what do I see and what do I see in life, and it changes as you go through life, even without grief, right?
Right.
I mean, like for example, me, I'm a big guy now. I have not seen my feet in 3.5 years. Okay, it changes. So that's a joke for me. But now Jordon, that wouldn't be funny because we see his feet. But so the same thing when you're going through grief. We have observations, and a lot of your funniest jokes are based on that, So I think it's important that people like us give permission to laugh.
Well, that's key, because I feel like one of the issues is early on, I felt like embarrassed to laugh, and like people would think, well, she didn't love her brother, she didn't care about him, she's laughing.
Right.
So what are your thoughts about that?
I think people that have those types of thoughts just haven't been through that type of an experience. I don't think they have an understanding of what, laughter and crying are two ends of the same spectrum, in my opinion. And
I like that,
there is no up without down, and you have to you got to let them both out. I think it's important. You have to give yourself permission to cry and let out the emotions when you need it. And it's just as important to have moments of where you let the joy in, where you let the laughter in.
So when Russell died, can you talk a little bit about, were you doing comedy before? Did you get in? Tell us about it.
I had been doing comedy for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years when Russell died.
Okay.
He came to a lot of my shows. He was my biggest fan. He was just about to graduate from the Culinary Institute with a pastry degree.
Okay.
And I remember specifically my dad asking me in the phone call when he told me that Russell had died in a car accident. He asked me if I knew what kind of funeral Russell would have wanted. And I said, I have no idea. All I know is that the cake afterwards has to be amazing.
Because he was a pastry chef.
Because he was a pastry chef.
Right.
So, I point back to that for myself as a moment where even in my darkest moment, I still kind of made a joke.
Yeah.
So after Russell died, how soon did you return to comedy?
I had a big show that I didn't know if I was going to be able to do or not. I was part of this group that had put together a number of shows at Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
And I did it in June. Russell came to the show in June, and came backstage after my set, told me that I was the first one to get the entire audience. Like, other comedians had gotten pockets of the room, but I had gotten everybody.
Wow.
He was very proud of me. And then he died the next month, and then in August I had a second show at the Garden, and I didn't really know if I was going to be able to do it.
Right.
But it was the running joke during the Shiva. Like, oh, is there anything I can do? Well, I got a big show coming up. Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
So I ended up selling about 130 tickets to that show.
Wow.
Out of 600 people in the room. So it wasn't the full Garden.
Yeah.
Right.
It's about 600 seats. And I ended up selling a lot of tickets to that show, and it may not have been my best set, but I felt like it was really important for me to get back up there and remind myself that I could do it. And comedy ended up becoming a real crutch for me in terms of my grief process. It was a great distraction because it took a long time before I had any jokes about my grief or about my loss.
It's interesting you say that, Heidi. I shared this story with you when we were talking last night. But I loved improv comedy, and Ashley died in 2001, and I had this fear. I don't know if you had it, but I had this fear that I couldn't be funny again. I had to know, would I ever be funny? Mine wasn't as much would I laugh, but could I make people laugh? And so, so weird. I'm like 6-7 months. You remember where you were at 6-7 months? We're like, how, you were a professional at that time, but I thought to myself, can I make people laugh? So there was an ad in Denver for this really good improv company, and I went and auditioned at 7 months, and I got the job. And when you're doing improv, you don't do every show all the time. You're in a troupe. So, I rehearsed with them, and then 2 weeks later, the guy says, I'm going to put you on the Saturday night show. Now, we sold out every show that we ever did. And so I went and killed it. It was like, I could make people laugh. And so I didn't say anything to anybody about my loss. And then we had the after party. You know how fun those can be. So we had the after party, and I'm sitting there eating pizza and drinking a beer or two, and I talk to the guy across from me, and I tell him, yeah, my daughter died in a car accident, 7 months ago, and I did this to see if I could make people laugh. And he's just like horrified,
Right.
And I went out to my car to drive home, and I stood there and I just cried, like uncontrollable. I called the guy up on Monday and said, okay, look, it's the right thing, but just the wrong time for me. I couldn't perform, but it gave me a peace of mind that I could make people laugh. Did you go through where you wondered whether you could make people laugh again?
I don't know if I had that exact same conundrum. I remember going to a show that I wasn't on about 3 weeks after Russell died, and not thinking about my grief for 2 hours and just laughing my butt off, and being reminded in that moment that I was being able to laugh myself was really the most important.
Right.
Getting back to performing and making other people laugh was almost secondary. I did feel like, to a certain degree, that I had to keep myself laughing to keep my own head above water, to keep my own mental stability.
Which is kind of the message we're trying to send, Heidi, is that don't underestimate, wherever you are in grief, whatever your loss is, the healing power of being able to laugh and to find humor in your journey. Like even you said, even in the darkest parts.
Laughter is big.
I was really
struck also. It has a lot of health benefits.
In doing comedy, surrounding myself with other comedians, it was really interesting how much grief was being gone through around me.
Right.
Not necessarily the same kind of loss or the same kind of difficulties, but you get a pretty mixed bag of mental health issues in the back room of a comedy club. Comedians are not always we kind of deal in our faults and our emotions as our currency. That's kind of what I think the best comedy
And talk about
is that.
You have a podcast now, and
Yeah.
I know I've been on it, but you have a lot of comedians on there.
Correct.
Talk about that a little bit, what people can expect, and also how they can.
Right. Well, so I've been running my podcast, Where's the Grief, for almost 8 years now, I guess. I tell people I interview other comedians who have experienced tragic loss, although I like to say it's not all comedians. I do interview other sad people too. But I found it to be, it's a combination of, like I said, being around other comedians
Right.
who have a shorthand for just being able to make anything into a joke, or taking our own insecurities and turning it on its head.
Right.
And having started to go to the Compassionate Friends and finding peer support and really talking with other people that had been through loss, I found very comfortable. And the podcast format had sort of just really exploded at that point. And I found it to be a perfect niche to really talk about it. I think it's one of those topics that people want to talk about, but there just aren't a lot of places or people out there. You know, I joke that, that nobody lets you talk about it for an hour. Even your therapist cuts you off after 45.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yes,
Well, you know,
Heidi.
I think when I go to the Compassionate Friends conferences, I hear laughter coming from your workshops and Alan's workshops. And you see people around the conference saying, wait a minute, who's in there? There's laughing in there. I want some of that. Like, I'm in such a sad space. I want to, like you said, I want to laugh, and I also want to release my emotion, because like you said, Jordon, they're close together. Crying and laughing are close together.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you are all doing such a service, because you're giving people permission
Right.
to laugh again.
Well,
In a certain sense, too, you know, we talk about this a lot on your show, about how overlooked the sibling loss is sometimes. Siblings are often like, you know, at a funeral, we're in the back, you know, kicking each other, or laughing
Yeah.
about something, you know, the inappropriate jokes that happen in those
Yeah.
moments. So it's a perpetual peanut gallery that we get to be a part of when we go to the conferences and when we're around other people that are going through the similar thing, where we have, that shorthand, those jokes that come out.
Yeah.
Because we are essentially the people, the kids in the back, you know, trying to
Right.
stifle our laughter.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I was at a conference and I ever heard a group. Now I wasn't with the siblings, but this is a group of bereaved parents on an elevator, and it's the first time in unison. And a lot of us didn't know each other. We're taking this elevator down at the hotel in Atlanta, but just a belly roar laugh. And what had happened is, the day before the conference, a lot of us had come in there. There was a major soccer tournament going on. And so the hallways were filled with kids, and they were out in front of your room kicking soccer balls up and down, and loud. And for some parents, it was kind of hard because there were so many kids around. It was right in their face. And then on the morning of the conference, they had gone. Their tournament had ended. And so a group of us gets in the elevator, and a lady didn't really know what she was saying, but she got in and she looked around and she says, "Oh, isn't it much nicer now that the kids are gone?"
Oh, no, not knowing that she was with bereaved parents.
You know,
Did you give her a yellow card for that?
yeah,
I feel like you
I
get
just
a
like, we're
penalty.
just belly laughing, and then she
that's
realized
funny.
what she said. But it reminded me, like I said, that our journey is different and it's unique as we're bereaved, but it's also still funny. There are still funny things that happen to us. And that's the whole point of doing this show. And so I think what's really cool about what we're doing out in Denver, and I hope it's something that we continue doing, which I want to talk to Jordon about, is talking about grief, but talking about the whole circumference of when you're grieving. You know, music, the role that music plays, the role that we had guests on other shows we've done, and with yoga, and you know, and all these different things. We do a workshop called the 10 Things You Can Do.
Yeah.
And you probably, I don't know if you know the number off the top of your head, but one of the things we talk in there about is laughter.
Yes.
And you talk about babies.
Yes.
Do you remember how many times it is?
They
Just tell
laugh
that.
on average, and this is research based.
Yes.
350 times a day.
Yeah.
A day, which some people are floored about, and they want to argue with me. I say, well, go to the research. I'm not doing the research. And in comparison, adults laugh on average 25 times a day. So, I mean, Jordon, it seems like you're like, okay, yeah, I get that. It's like we need to make space for more laughter in our lives, right?
Yeah, I think we do.
It's healthy. It increases our immune system. I mean, there's so many health benefits to laughter. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and that's, so I think that part of it is in giving permission, certainly.
Yeah.
But it's also, it makes life worth living. I mean, it really, really does. So what have you learned in your comedy what has grief added to your comedy? Because I saw you recently speak a year ago in Hawaii.
Right.
And you had a grief group and a comedy club at the same time. That's how I felt. You were there as well.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And to me, I think that's masterful to pull that off. So
I mean, I think it's important to laughter is one of the things, you know, that makes the medicine go down. You know, sometimes there are hard truths that you have to impart when you're talking about grief and loss, and how you keep your head, you know, how you keep your mental stability. And I think having jokes in there makes it feel more normal, makes it not a scary, makes it a less scary topic to talk about for sure. And when you get other people to laugh at it, it's that's the laughter of understanding.
Right.
That what I'm talking about is hitting home. You know, I think the first joke I wrote about my grief was, I tell people all the time, I go to a support group for bereaved siblings. And that's a great sentence that you can use if you ever need to get out of a conversation.
Exactly.
You shared some, I mean, Russell, let's be honest, some of the jokes write themselves in the stories, because you have great stories.
He's hilarious.
Can you
He was
share
hilarious.
with our audience today maybe just something about Russell, one of your cool little stories of who he was?
Oh, I got a lot of good stories. Russell did not wait online for anything. He didn't like waiting online. He was a really small kid, so he could sneak in places, but he was also really good at walking in like he owned the place. You know, we used to go to we were big Knicks fans, go to Madison Square Garden a lot. Russell would not sit in our seats because we were all the way up in the nosebleed, so he would go find a much better seat. And somebody would come and say, I think you're sitting in my seat. And Russell would say, okay, let me see your ticket. Oh, it appears you're correct. And then he would go closer.
How many people in this country do you think do stand-up comedy and then can turn around the next day and run a grief support group? So let's switch from the comedy for just a second and talk a little bit about the grief work that you do, healing grief work with siblings.
Totally out of left field, something I never thought I would be doing. My parents started going to the Compassionate Friends, a self-help support group for people that have lost a child, a grandchild, or a sibling. They started going 3 weeks after Russell died. And for about 6 months, they kept letting me know that there was a sibling group there. Oh, you should come by, there's a sibling group. And I ultimately went so they would shut up about it. That was the goal. I was going to go, it wouldn't be helpful, and we'd never have to speak about it again.
Right.
And pretty immediately, I actually found it to be very helpful. And it's like all these years later, now I run it, and they don't come. Right. So it's
ironically.
Yeah. But I found it to be really like just hearing other people talking about what they were going through and recognizing some of it, like, oh, that sounds familiar. Maybe I'm not going crazy. Maybe I'm not. Being in that space was really helpful, and it's where I learned how to it's where I learned how to be again. How I learned how to be myself again was be in those circles, talking about my grief and feeling like I could make jokes in there about it as well.
Well, that's the other piece. When you and Alan make jokes, there's benefits because you're watching the audience change and they're feeling better. You know, and when I go and see you, it makes me feel better. So being a comedian, it makes you feel better because it's fun to be up there and making people laugh. And then the people in the audience, it's a win-win for everybody, basically.
Yeah, I think also, you know, we talk about humor and things that we see that are funny, but our children did things that were funny, just like we asked you about his Russell stories. And I think sometimes when I'm working with bereaved parents, I'm like, hey, your kids had funny stories too.
I've got a good story about my brother.
Well, let's hear it.
So I was going to college, and I was going to University of Utah. I lived in New York. And so I said to my parents said, Heidi, you can have the TV set. You're allowed to take it in the car and drive it out, you know. So I went, so my brother goes to school that day. I go to get the TV. He had handcuffed it to his desk.
Oh.
So it wasn't going anywhere, okay?
It wasn't leaving.
At all.
You didn't know where he had the key?
No.
No,
Needless to say, I was out in Utah without the TV set.
My Ashley was, you know, I'll tell people this, you know, our kids were unique, and sometimes we deify them, you know, after they're gone, like they were perfect. But I say my Ashley was amazing. She was my oldest child, my only daughter, and we kind of had that relationship that you're not, they say, don't have, or we're like we were like best friends, you know. And but I say she let me grow up on the job of being her dad because I didn't know what I was doing according to her, and I say apparently 11-year-olds were dating everywhere, and I had yet to hear about it, you know. And when you begin sharing those stories, and people begin sharing them with you, and they'll tell you the silly things or the funny things they did. So laughter can come not only from this crazy life we're living, bereaved, where Russell will always be a part of your life, Ashley will always be a part of my life, and Scott will always be a part of your life. But they left us a lot of laughter in their
Absolutely.
stories and in their memories. And doggone it, if we don't go back and pull that up and enjoy it and laugh with it, then shame on us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't forget to
And
laugh.
some of it's captured on video.
That's exactly right.
I can actually pull that up.
So
Yeah.
Jordon, where do we find you? Alan, where do we find you? Where can we go to see what you're doing?
Well, you
with
can always
comedy?
follow my podcast, Where's the Grief? You can get it wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you're not a tech-savvy person, you can also just go to where'sthegrief.com. And you can always go to russellferberfoundation.org. It's the organization that my parents started. My parents and I started in memory of my brother Russell. We do a big fundraiser for it every year. We've paid out over $1 million in scholarship money over the last
Wow.
18 years.
That's
We have
just
a
awesome.
full 2-year scholarship in the
Amazing.
pastry program at the Culinary Institute of America in Russell's name. And our 2023 fundraiser is June 28th. And tickets are available on the website now.
And I will be there. Doors open at 6:30
Right.
p.m.
Heidi will be there. You could take that as a promise or a threat.
Yes, and Heidi will be July 6th, downtown Denver, Colorado.
Yes.
Our show, Laugh Till You Cry.
Yep.
I'm back on the stand-up comedy stage. Are you writing material? I'm writing all kinds of
Listen,
good stuff.
I got jokes.
I got jokes. I'm ready. We'll have a very special guest, and we'll put some promos out on how to do that. You can get a hold of me and learn about what I do at Angels Across the USA. I'll be on tour all over the United States until the end of May. So I'll see you, of course, in Denver. We're going to have a good time. I'll see you there.
I'll be in the audience laughing.
But thank you, Jordon, for, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, for the organization of the Compassionate Friends reminding us to laugh.
Absolutely.
Keeping us laughing. You've kept us all laughing for all these years, and that is a real great gift to bring to the party. So thank you for sharing that so
thank you.
openly with us.
I agree with Alan. You've both given a lot of laughter and
Thank
given
you.
us permission. And it's changed the whole feeling of the conference.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you for watching today. This is open to hope.com. If you want to see more with Alan and Jordon, please go and visit our site. And we always say, if you've lost hope, please lean on mine, Alan's, and Jordon's until you find your own. And God bless.
God bless.
Waka waka.
Thank you, Jordon.
And that is a wrap.